In 1986, I was hired to work on a film called The Mosquito Coast, which starred Harrison Ford, Helen Mirren, and River Phoenix. It was directed by Peter Weir, who had just directed Harrison Ford in Witness. And it was shot in Belize, which is a small country between Mexico and Guatemala. It used to be called British Honduras. In fact, it had only become independent a few years before I got there. Mosquito Coast was based on a novel by Paul Theroux, who's a best-selling novelist. Now he's a little bit known for being the father of Justin Theroux. And Justin played the part in a TV series where he played Harrison Ford's part. It's about a guy who's not very comfortable with the modern world, and he takes his family to what he thinks is a more pure, primitive place where he can give them a better life, in his estimation. And not everything goes so perfectly as you can imagine. I got into Belize, and I went to my hotel, which was, I actually got the room that Paul Theroux had while he was visiting. So I had a nice room and a nice view of trees swaying in the wind. Very tropical, very atmospheric. And, I sat in and unpacked and turned on the TV, which was interesting. And I got a call, and they said, we're going to be having dailies, which is the footage that they'd shot that day. And you're welcome to come. So I went to the place, which was in the same building, and I sat down in the second row. And shortly after, Harrison Ford comes in and sits down right in front of me. And he turns around and he looks at me and he says, "Who are you?" And I explained who I was, because I was the new person. And then I said, Harrison, there's something I want to ask you. And I could see his face go, oh God, this guy's going to ask me some fanboy question about Star Wars or Indiana Jones. And I said, what is up with the Belizean hardware store commercials? Let me explain. They would have these commercials where there'd be a can of paint and there'd be this amazing voice on it, and it would say, "We have a large selection of paints. Red," and you see a can of red paint, blue paint, green, yellow, and I would watch the whole thing. And let me tell you, after you saw this commercial 5 or 6 times, you were in a different world. So, I wanted to know, because Harrison Ford is a very successful man in show business, and I'm sure that he could illuminate me what was going on with this thing. And he totally understood what I was talking about. And then he went on to mention a pastry shop that he had seen an ad for, which I had also seen, and it had this strange thing that kind of pulsed. It's a little bit like Jell-O, like you pushed some Jell-O and it was doing that, but kind of like an alien brain. And he said, "What is that shit?" So the next day, I go to the set. I actually ride in with the producer of the film, Jerry Hellman. Now, Jerome Hellman is an extremely important producer. He made 7 films. One of them was Midnight Cowboy. One of them was Coming Home, highest quality you can imagine. But I don't know how to describe what he was. He came up to me and he said, "I saw you talking to Harrison at Daly's, and next time you have anything you want to say to Harrison, just bring it to me, and I'll talk to him too. I'll set it up." And I thought, man, that would not have worked last night. Not with the hardware store stuff. I don't know how he could have brokered that. And in fact, I thought, I'm not going to be able to do any of my job at all if I have to work through a producer. I have to build relationships with people, relationships of trust that will then let me be able to sit down with them and do an interview main thing is just to make a friendship, and so that later on it's easy to talk to them about this stuff. Otherwise, it's awful. So what was great about it is that once he had told me this, it's like it never happened. I just pretended it didn't happen, and he never brought it up again. He just let me do my work. Now, Harrison, while we enjoyed each other's company, it was clear that he really did not like doing interviews. And I could get the sense that it might be the kind of thing that he was going to postpone on me, and I was going to be suffering over getting it right up until the days I had to leave. I was only there a month. So I said, Harrison, how about this? How about one question a day? And he said, question of the day. I like it. So every day I would go to his tent. I mean, he didn't have a trailer. He had a tent. And I would go in there and I would ask the question of the day. And these were not brilliant questions. It was kind of like this. It would be like there would be River Phoenix night or Helen Mirren night. And, turn the tape recorder on, get the answer quickly, turn it off. And then the rest of the time, while we were waiting for the shot to be set up, then Harrison and I would just be having fun. And he always had great refreshments in the tent. And so it was just a very relaxing place to be. I always felt a lot better after I got into that tent and shared some of Harrison's refreshments. So anyway, Helen Mirren was somebody that I had, I'm going to be honest here, fantasized about since I was a teenager. I mean, you may think of her, if you're a younger person, you think of her as Queen Elizabeth, or you think of her as this stately, respectable older woman who does all these classy things. But to me, she was just the hottest woman in the world. And I had seen her in films like Savage Messiah and Oh Lucky Man and, oh God, Midsummer Night's Dream. And she was the perfect woman. She did lots of Shakespeare and lots of nude scenes. And the other thing is I had gone to see a play in New York, which was by Peter Brook, and it's called The Conference of the Birds. And I really loved this thing. So I went out and got the book about the production of it that went all over Africa. And Helen Mirren was part of that production team. And she said in the book, she was quoted as, "Remember your lines when you're swinging from vines." And I thought, I like her even more. That is like, isn't that like the best line ever? So what I did with Helen is we had to walk from the scenes in the jungle all the way to the base camp where her trailer was. And so I had handily a little umbrella, one of those little fold-up umbrellas that you can keep in your bag. And I pulled it out and I just walked up to her and put the umbrella up in the air. And of course, who wouldn't want to walk under an umbrella and not walk in the rain? And so we had these wonderful chats. And what she told me then, and I don't know if it's true, but it's what she told me. She said, I get called all the time when screenwriters, because male screenwriters can't write good women characters. And they don't know what to do about it, so they just hire me. And when they see my face on the screen, then the character looks real. It looks thought out. And so I can basically fix a script just by showing up and being me. And I thought that was interesting. I think she certainly progressed a long way from that very shortly after that. But, and I don't know if it was ever true, but it was funny. And she liked me enough so that when she was asked to give a speech, she asked me if I would write it for her. And I thought that was a really interesting writing exercise because it wasn't just trying to replicate the way she spoke to me. You had to imagine what would Helen Mirren how would she speak if she was speaking to a group of strangers in Belize? And, so I kind of formaled it up a little bit. But I wanted to put in as much Helen in it as I could. And she used a lot of phrases that I was really unfamiliar with, like a damn sight. I didn't know. From the way she said it, I figured it was kind of like, you're desperately seeking Susan video. Is a damn sight better than this one? You better step up your game. So I wedged this stuff in, little kind of expressions that she said, so it would sound like her, and she wouldn't even have to put any of that stuff in. And she liked it. And so if you want to get into professional writing, I'll throw that in there for free. You give yourself the assignment of writing a speech for Helen Mirren. It's good. It's a good test. Then with Peter Weir, he was a director who I knew his work very, very well. I'd seen every single film he'd made. He was from his early days in Australia. And I said to him, seems to me you're always making the same story. Like all great artists, you have a story that fascinates you. So a person is brought into an alien environment and has to cope with it, something that they can't understand. And I was like, Picnic at Hanging Rock and The Last Wave and Year of Living Dangerously and Gallipoli with War. And you could take it all the way up to Harrison Ford going among the Amish people in Witness. And I thought this was such a commonplace, dull thing to say. But it was like he acted like he'd never heard this before. And it bugged him, because he didn't want to be somebody who was telling the same story over and again. He wanted to be somebody who could tell any kind of story. And so I don't know, maybe he had heard that critics must have said that many times, but maybe he had never read those critics, and maybe he just didn't want to hear that kind of comment from me, who was there to write about his film. But I learned, don't do that. And I guess that's why I asked that question. He was very focused on doing things simply and in an unpretentious manner. He worked very closely as a team with his cinematographer, John Seale. And they had an approach which was the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. So every single shot they did, they would turn to each other. Is this simple? And the idea was they didn't want to have anything too precious, anything too forced. Didn't want to be moving the camera in some artful way that would just call attention to itself. It should just be what serves the moment in the scene. And it was very interesting for me to watch them debate this idea of whether it was simple and what should be left in, because sometimes, I figure that you have to do things like move the camera or compose a shot in a certain way. River Phoenix, I'm not going to talk about too much in this video, because I actually wrote a story for Elle magazine about River, after he died, I wrote about my experiences with him on this film. So I'm going to do a whole video on River Phoenix, so I'm just going to pass by River on this. Now, we were going to be shooting in a sequence that was a hurricane. And the problem with the water on the mainland where we were is that it was really dirty. The raw sewage went down to the water in tiny little canals on the side of the road. And so it was disgusting. And there was a coral reef that kept all that foul stuff in one place. I'm sure they've fixed all this by now, who knows. But on the other side of the coral reef, that's where you had the turquoise water. That's where the resorts were, and that's where the rich people went to enjoy Belize. But where we were was just kind of not so hot. traveling around doing shots in the mainland of Belize was beautiful, though. There was Mayan history. I would just show up for a location one morning, and there would be this amazing Mayan building. And it was pretty thrilling, actually. But they had to do this sequence, and they weren't going to throw that dirty water on them. So, so they wanted to go to the clean part, to the resort part of Belize. So that's where they had been building and preparing for this hurricane shot. And what they built was this huge tank, and it had tens of thousands of gallons of water. And there was this trough going down like a toboggan slide going down from the tank. And the idea was we were going to stick Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren and River Phoenix and the kids who were playing, the other children in the family, and they were going to be on this raft, and we were going to just dump all this water on them. It's a big tidal wave. And, we had fans, and they were even going to use a helicopter, which, of course, scared everybody because 3 people had been killed 2 years before this on the Twilight Zone movie. You can see this shot here. It's me sitting with Peter Weir and Harrison Ford in front of that thing. This shot of me is me with a camera that was given to me by the still photographer Francois Duhamel. And he had this suggestion that I would take a picture out on the pier that they built. So he set up the camera where you couldn't screw it up and it couldn't go out of focus, and he sent me out on this pier. And I thought, well, that sounds like fun. I'll be actually doing shots that could end up being part of the publicity of this film. What I didn't think about is that if you're standing on a pier in like really, really hot sun, direct sun, and there's reflecting water all around, you're going to get burned alive. And even though I was wearing my shirt, I still got severe burns on my back, like skin peeling away. I know, it's disgusting, but that's what happened. It was horrible. Now, I didn't mention that to get to this place, you had to take these little 5 or 6 seater planes. And the people who piloted these planes were flat out crazy. They were like halfway looking at where they were going, and the plane would just, my stomach would just go, and it would just like fall, and they just didn't care. They were fine, whatever happened, And so I took this little flight of doom to the place we were shooting, San Pedro, and then I had to go back in the plane to pick up the crew from Entertainment Tonight. Then I had to go back in the plane again to bring the Entertainment Tonight crew to the place where we're going to shoot. And I said to myself, I am never going on this plane again. So I found a guy who said he knew the way to pilot me in a little boat, like a little rowboat, through the coral reef. He knew the path. So I paid him. I just took the money because I did not want to go through that. And he did. He got me through this path that he understood, and he got me back to Belize City, safe and sound. And I got in a bit of trouble for that because people felt, well, why do you get these special privileges? And but I'm so glad I did it because one of those planes crashed. Shortly after that, nobody was killed, but I don't think they felt so hot about it. I think they were injured, maybe not severely, but I'm so happy I didn't go down in the plane. Now, time came. We went through the month very quickly. It was time for me to go, and I went to say goodbye to Harrison, and he said, "So what happens now?" And I didn't know how to answer that because I didn't know, was I supposed to say, well, let's stay in touch? But I didn't really know what that meant. And I didn't want to be too forceful. I didn't want to come on too strong. Didn't know what he meant. And so I said, well, I'll see you at the premiere. And which, of course, I wasn't invited to. And I realize now that maybe all he was saying was, we had fun, so let's keep in touch. You know, who knows? Maybe there'll be a moment when we can get together again or work on a film or who knows what. But, you know, I've done so many things that are stupid like that, but it happened in an instant. Sometime later, I was considered for the Indiana Jones sequel where he worked with River, and I tried to get on that film unsuccessfully. I was not hired on that, and maybe they had somebody that they liked working with. Anyway, it's all very sad because I would have liked to have spent more time with River before he died, and more time with Harrison too. I'll leave you with one little experience, which was a few days after I got to Belize. We were doing a scene where we were riding in these very primitive rafts through this kind of narrow stream, and there'd be tree branches that would go by you, and and you couldn't really think about anything except for being in this raft because you were there for a very long time. And I kept thinking as I was sitting out there, I was thinking of that Beatles song, Tomorrow Never Knows. And, turn off your mind, relax, go downstream, whatever that is. And I was really feeling in the moment being there, something that I rarely was in New York, because New York I was always just doing too many things at once. My head was always racing. And you might think that eventually I would get to some kind of profound thought. But being the person who I was, what finally happened was I went, I have never been paid so much money to sit my ass down on a raft. I hope you've enjoyed my little story about working on the Mosquito Coast. I'll be back soon with more stories from my illustrious career as a film publicist. Hope to see you then.